There is a long-standing idea that feminism is unfeminine. From the shrewish harpies of the first wave to the blue-haired, green-haired, purple-haired sociology graduates of the third or fourth waves, non-compliant men have derided feminist women for their lack of femininity. But this is a mistake, because feminism is actually extremely feminine. The men who said that feminists are unfeminine were talking about the good aspects of femininity, the things about femininity that men liked. Most especially, they were talking about the aspects of femininity that were glamorous, pretty, sweet, or sexy. They might also have included things like feminism's rejection of the family and motherhood in their criticism that it was unfeminine, but for the most part, the criticism has been a wail of despair that feminist women are so appallingly ugly, and deliberately so. People, both women and men, find it hard to make judgments of the other sex without their sexual preferences becoming involved in that judgment. And feminism has so poisoned gender relations that men are now going their own way, turning their backs upon the new woman because she has so little to offer. There can be no doubt that feminists certainly rejected the glamorous, the pretty, the sweet, and the sexy, on the grounds that it pandered to the bestial appetites of the demon patriarchy. Feminists of the second wave were particularly diligent in rejecting every aspect of femininity that might conceivably please a man. They took pride in this, and created the 1970s caricature of the man-hating lesbian feminist with hairy armpits and hairy legs wearing dungarees. More recently, the only thing achieved by the slut walk campaigns was to conclusively prove that it takes more than just a pair of fishnet stockings to make someone erotic. The total absence of any trace of eroticism in the slut walkers demonstrates precisely what men were criticizing when they said that feminists lack femininity. This is why third wave feminism attempted to convince people that pretty, sexy women could also be feminists. Beauty and sex appeal have always been a source of personal empowerment for women, and the third wave feminists wanted to keep that power, even while annihilating the society that went along with it. The "This is what a feminist looks like" campaign was intended to persuade everyone that feminism was an inclusive ideology that could even include men, if they were sufficiently submissive and obedient to feminine authority. If men were to shed their toxic masculinity and embrace their feminine side, then they could rise to the status of being almost as good as women. So we're being offered two ideas of the feminine, both of which see the feminine as an unconditionally good thing. The first is the traditional criticism that feminists are unfeminine because femininity means being sugar and spice and everything nice. The second is the female gender supremacist belief that women are perfectly fabulous the way they are, and what's needed is to make men more feminine. But take a moment to contemplate the mistake that's been made. It's a mistake that has been staring everyone in the face for 50 years. What has been overlooked are all the bad things about femininity, the things about women that have been driving men crazy for centuries. When we look at the bad things about femininity, we find that feminism is in fact extremely feminine. It's all the worst things about femininity. Here are a few examples. If you'd asked men over the last, say, 5,000 years what bothers them the most about the woman they live with, the most frequent answer would probably have been her nagging. Gender roles meant that men had financial responsibility for women and were required to provide for women. So if the wife wanted new shoes, she had to get her husband to provide them. "Look at the state of my shoes. If you were a real man, you'd be ashamed to have your poor wife seen in such shoes. The woman from number 27 has new shoes. Her husband is a proper man. He knows how to provide for a wife. If you earned a better salary, I could have a decent pair of shoes, etc., etc., etc. Now, consider how feminists are continually complaining about how more must be done for the benefit of women. They never stop grumbling and criticizing and reproaching and demanding. Feminism is a license to bitch. If there are 3,000 refuges for battered women and 0 refuges for battered men, then feminism demands even more refuges for women. If women have reproductive rights that men don't have, then feminism demands that women must be given even greater superiority in reproductive rights. Feminists are incessantly nagging the government, the state, the taxpayer, and men that more must be done for women. How feminine is that? Emotional blackmail. Imagine a traditional marriage in which the husband and wife are having a quarrel. Maybe they can't agree about going out to the cinema tonight, or they can't agree about whether to spend money on a holiday or a new car. If the wife can't get her own way, she suddenly declares, "You don't love me anymore." Then the husband has to give in to the wife because that's the only way to show that he does still love her. Think of any argument involving a feminist. It might be about employment practices or welfare benefits or custody rights. If the feminist can't get her own way, she suddenly declares, "You hate women." Then everyone has to give in to the feminist because that's the only way to show that they don't hate women. "You hate women" is exactly the same maneuver in an argument as "you don't love me anymore." They are both a crude and unjustified appeal that everyone must pander to a woman's feelings. How feminine is that? Another of the classic negative aspects of femininity is illogicality. How many men have despaired of making sense of their girlfriend or wife's illogical behavior? She complains that they must have more household income, so he sacrifices his leisure activities to work overtime and make more money. Then she complains that he doesn't spend enough time with her and the kids. Or she reproaches him for not being sufficiently communicative about his feelings. So he starts telling her about his feelings, but she interrupts him dismissively because those aren't the feelings that she's interested in. Consider the quote on the screen. It does not specify what factual state of affairs should constitute the level of safety a citizen should be entitled to. Instead, it addresses women's feelings of being unsafe and demands that men should do something about it. It would be impossible for women or men to be completely safe in any society. But feminism demands more than the impossible. It demands that men must take responsibility for whether women feel safe, when their feelings of insecurity may have nothing to do with how safe women actually are, especially when compared to how safe men are. Yet somehow men are expected to ensure that women's feelings are comfortable feelings. How feminine is that? Here's an old favourite of female behaviour that has endlessly frustrated their male partners. When the wife is losing an argument, she suddenly starts talking about a completely unrelated issue, changing the subject apparently at random and without admitting that she has lost the argument. Instead, she will raise grievances over things that were said or done months or even years earlier, regardless of how irrelevant they are, in order to attack her husband with fresh reproaches. Whenever a feminist is losing an argument, she does exactly the same thing. Let's say that the argument is about women falsely accusing men of sex crimes, and someone points out that the feminist policy of "believe women" is outrageously sexist, advocating that women should be believed because they are women, and men should not be believed because they are men. Believe women is a demand that there should not be gender equality before the law. The feminist cannot deny this because it is self-evidently true. So what does she do? She attacks her opponent with an allegation about hate speech or domestic violence or the gender wage gap or anything else that will change the subject. How feminine is that? Controlling behavior. It's a time-worn cliche that soon after marriage, wives try to stop their husbands from spending time with their male friends. No more evenings out with the boys. She doesn't want them to influence him and doesn't want him to spend money with them instead of spending money on what she thinks is important, like a new stair carpet. Husbands aren't to be trusted on a boys' night out. Similarly, feminism cannot abide men acting collectively without female supervision. Feminists will pretend that a group of feminist men reproaching themselves for their toxic masculinity is what a men's movement ought to be. But the actual, real men's movement is intolerable to feminists. Men talking freely to other men about the injustices they suffer as men is something that feminism cannot possibly allow, any more than it would permit gentlemen's clubs or any other kind of male-only social group. How feminine is that? The point, I think, has been made. Feminism is extremely feminine. That's why the feminist society we live in has such emotional incontinence. Those in positions of power and influence care nothing for evidence-based, logical arguments intended to reach rational justification or rational refutation. They only care about wallowing in their puerile feelings, virtue signaling as the compassionate, humanitarian, moral paragons that they believe themselves to be. A feminized society is an infantilized society, and an infantilized society is a dumbed-down society. Feelings don't care about facts, and feelings are all that matter when the crying children are in charge.